Stories that we hear affect us much more deeply when they relate to something in our lives, in our experience. For example, a story about autism in a child will be heard one way by parents who have a son or a daughter who has been diagnosed with that developmental disorder. On the other hand, that same story about autism will be heard in a very different way by people who have no children. That is also true with the stories that we hear in the Gospels. Because of the pandemic, we may hear this Sunday's Gospel about the cure of the leper. We might hear that differently than we've heard it in past years. At the time of Jesus, people with leprosy were in a really terrible situation. They were believed to be contagious and were cast out of the community. They had to live apart from family and friends. They had to remain at a distance and to warn people of their approach by shouting, "Unclean, unclean." They were dependent on the charity of other people. They were condemned to a life of sickness and loneliness and despair. From our point of view today, that existence could seem very harsh and cruel. But in an age without hospitals, without medicines and treatments, that may have been the best response to leprosy that was available. There were just no other alternatives. That was the best that the people of that day could do with their limited resources and with their need to protect the community. We may be in somewhat of a similar situation today. Today, we're at the mercy of a fast-spreading coronavirus, and we don't have a great deal of resources. We're waiting for a vaccines to be developed and to be distributed and to be given to a large number of people. But in the meanwhile, we have to continue to use face masks to sanitize different surfaces that we touch, to wash our hands repeatedly, to avoid congregating in groups, and to take our temperature and other precautions like that. Some people find those measures very restrictive and bothersome, but they really are necessary at this time. They're necessary for protecting the community. The restrictions for the lepers in the past were difficult, but they were necessary to keep that disease from spreading through the people. And we need to see the restrictions today connected with the pandemic in the same way. They're difficult, they can be bothersome, but they're necessary for protecting the community, especially the people we love, the people that we're closest to. And so at this time we're instructed to remain socially distant from others. We're told to wear face masks to protect ourselves and others from possible infection. We're advised to avoid crowded situations and to limit our social interactions. We're reminded to keep washing our hands and to clean any surfaces that we have to touch and maybe were touched by others. We are to do our best to avoid any interactions with people with COVID-19. And if we think we have been in contact with an infected person, we're to quarantine ourselves for 14 days. Those circumstances can help us appreciate the situation of the leper and also the surprising action of Jesus in Sunday's Gospel. Rather than telling the leper to stay away, Jesus allows him to approach him. He does not demand that the leper remain socially distanced and speak to him from afar. And so, kneeling before Jesus, the man begs for a cure. And rather than responding only with words at a distance, Jesus touches the leper. We are told, moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him. Jesus breaks the taboo that forbade contact with anyone who was unclean. By his action, Jesus restored the man's health, and in doing so, he also allowed him to resume interaction with the community. We can relate to the sufferings of the leper because of our experience with COVID-19 this past year. But the story also tells us about the effects of sin. Sin is a virus that distorts our dignity as children of God. It harms our relationships with others. It makes us imperfect witnesses to the truth of the gospel. It darkens our lives and adds to the darkness of our society, of our world. In a word, sin makes us unclean. It makes us spiritual lepers. But rather than avoiding us lepers and remaining distant from us, God reaches out to us in Jesus, just as he reached out to the leper in the gospel. He touches us with his healing and forgiveness. He brings us back into relationship with him and with his people, the church. We are very much aware of the harmful effects of the coronavirus. We wait for and seek out the vaccine that will lessen the dangers. We should be just as conscious of the harmful effects of the virus of sin, and we need to seek out the vaccine that Jesus offers us through his sacraments and through his church. Maybe such a reflection about sin as a disease and the vaccine that we need to overcome that disease could help us to plan our path through this season of Lent that's going to begin next Wednesday.